everybody. Welcome to StudioZ, a podcast of empowerment, abilities over disabilities. I'm your host, Melissa Marvel. Katie Wolf Whaley is the director of the Kentucky Supported Employment Training Project and oversees other contracts with the State Office of Vocational Rehabilitation at the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute. She coordinates training and technical assistance for service providers and presents on personalized employment supports for people with disabilities across the state and nationally. She currently serves as the president of the Kentucky chapter of ABSI, sits on the national board of ABSI, and chairs Kentucky's Employment First Council. Katie holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Ohio Wesleyan University and a Master of Social Work from the University of Kentucky. So today we'd like to welcome Katie Wolf Whaley to our show. She is with the University of Kentucky. And Katie, just to make it simple, I'm just going to have you explain what department you're with and what exactly do you do. And then we'll get more into why we're together today to chat about something very important. How's that?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Melissa. So I work at the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky, and we are under the Vice President of Research. We're not associated with a particular college, but we are one of a network of university centers for excellence in disability across the country. And so HDI has projects, initiatives, training, research all across the lifespan pertaining to different aspects of disability.
Excellent. So Katie and I met each other actually through Zoom groups involvement with what is called Supported Employment, and that is a program whereby we are trained to become specifically supported employment specialists. And we go through the training at the University of Kentucky, and Katie provides. And then as we graduate from that program, we then are able to provide supported employment services through Zoom Group, the organization. So with that, Katie and I have always chatted just about, getting the word out and letting people know what it is. And there's been a lot of change within our state within the last few years, starting in 2018. And so with that, those changes, I think it's just really important that the community becomes aware of it, the opportunities for the individuals with disabilities, and some of their desires to fulfill vocational goals and whatnot. So without further ado, Katie is going to just start sharing with us a little bit about Employment First, how it came about, what is it, and then we'll just kind of have more flow of conversation.
Yeah, thanks. So as you mentioned, I do train people all across the state who provide supported employment. And so supported employment is a service funded through the State Office of Vocational Rehabilitation to help people with a significant impact figure out what a good job could be and then go to work. It's been around since the early 80s. But what we've seen is employment rates haven't necessarily shot up the way maybe we would hope they would for people. And so Employment First has really become a big shift in our field of focus. And so Employment First is the idea that for people with disabilities of working age who receive publicly funded services, that employment be that first and priority option of service. It doesn't mean that people have to go to work, but that if they choose to go to work, that's where we prioritize our services. You know that we spend money on lots of different types of services for people with disabilities, so now it's really looking at employment, which is that general expectation for adults in our society, that people go to work, that we have that expectation for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's wonderful that we are, the views or the perceptions of individuals with disabilities over the years has also transitioned in the fact that many of the individuals used to be basically in programming and kind of isolated from the world, and yet now our focus and our mission is to give everybody the opportunity to be in the community. The Employment First opportunity is actually in, I believe, 41 states at this point.
It is.
So I am thrilled that it's gaining more and more momentum. And so what kind of triggered that change for the state of Kentucky about 2018?
So it was, you're right, there are 41 states that have Employment First either as legislation and or as an executive order. Prior to 2018, former Governor Bevin brought together a task group on Work Matters, which was an initiative of governors across the country looking at different segments of the population that tend to have lower rates of employment, and how can we promote employment opportunities for more people across our Commonwealth and across our country. And the idea of employment first, part of that came out of that conversation and maybe got attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. In 2018, we had our first executive order stating that employment first is the first and preferred option for people in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And then again in 2020, another executive order was signed by Governor Beshear, which is exciting in our state to show it's not a partisan issue.
Right.
It's just good policy.
Right. I am thrilled. I was actually very excited in 2018 and more so to your point in 2020. So from a standpoint of where we are today,
Mm-hmm.
what are the challenges? What are the issues? What do we need to do as a community? How can we get the word out? What steps can we do as actionable items to further this awareness and opportunity for individuals with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We've seen these historically low employment rates for
Mm-hmm.
people with disabilities and these long-held beliefs that people with disabilities don't work and that they can't contribute to our economy in meaningful ways. And you and I both know that that's just not true because we've seen it too
Right.
many times, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so it's really raising those expectations and shifting that belief system across our society, and that includes employers, educators, families, people with disabilities themselves, our service system, and the way that we provide services and supports for people to get everyone on that same page of employment as that first thing that we look at in people's lives. I mean, I work, I have a full-time job, and I do other things in my life too, but
Right.
my schedule is set by my work, by my employment, right? That's my priority of timing, and then I fit those other things in. Volunteering, activities that I do, time with friends, and those kind of things. But since my boss might be listening, employment is where my schedule.
Well, I'm gonna laugh. I'm gonna laugh because I'm looking at you as you're saying that's your primary calendar. And it's like my children have always said to me, "You live by your calendar." Well, my calendar is all work, so I totally appreciate that, and that's why I was kind of chuckling and smiling. But you're right. I mean, and a lot of individuals, regardless of a disability or not.
Mm-hmm.
We find purpose and value in who we are as a person by what we do through work.
Yeah.
So the fact that we are now looking to start working with the families younger
Mm-hmm.
and to address, they too can have this opportunity. We just need to get the tools in the toolkit, make sure that they're accessible to these individuals,
Right.
and help them along the way so that when they do graduate, they have that opportunity because that purpose will fall in line, and hopefully through our resources and efforts we can have those individuals secure jobs. And I think one of the things that I'd like for you to share within the Employment First, the initiative about competitive integrated employment and
Mm-hmm.
kind of what that is.
Yeah, so when I talk about employment in regards of Employment First, the technical language, as you said, is competitive integrated employment. And what that means is that somebody is finding a job that typically exists in the community, right? Anybody could work at this business. It's fair wage, so comparable to what other people doing similar work in that business are earning, and that they have that opportunity to be around other people without disabilities just like any other employee would. So it's that technical language in our service system,
Right.
but what it means is a real job for a real wage, not a business that was intentionally created to hire people with disabilities
Mm-hmm.
or that uses an older federal statute that allows for less than the minimum wage, but that it's real work for a real wage.
Understood. So, how will or how do you see this transition occurring within our state? Because this is at a state by state level. I think that's kind of important to note that if you're listening from another state, it might be slightly different. But how do you see that moving forward for the state of Kentucky at this point?
So just because we have these great executive orders doesn't mean that we woke up on May 16th of 2018 and everything was different, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so you're right. I think a big part of the focus has to start when people are young,
Mm-hmm.
to really set those expectations. For so long, the word disability often has been seen as a way to opt out of the workforce,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, we want to make sure that that's not the case,
Right.
that families have high expectations and that they think about their children who happen to have a disability of growing up and having a good adult life as they would for any of their other kids. And that really starts in our school system. And educators have so much on them already, and I am very thankful for the teachers in my children's life who work very hard. But just that if we say employment first is that priority, that becomes our planning process, because a big part of what schools do, right, is prepare our kids to become adults. And so we have all kinds of official planning systems within our school system. There's the individualized education plan and IEP.
Very familiar with.
Yes, I'm sure you are. And you know a lot about that idea of transition, right? So that transitioning from school to what comes next. And so when we look at employment first across our state, it's that idea that what comes next for our students is either going on to post-secondary education or is employment. And that kids aren't graduating to the couch or entering other types of places where people with disabilities go, but that they're taking advantage of those work experience opportunities in school and internships, and that becomes a part of that planning process, because we know that students who work while they're in high school are much more likely to work when they're adults, and that we find those opportunities for all of our kids, including the kids who might receive special education services.
So, we both know that the schools, they already have a lot of responsibility. So what can we as community or families also do to perhaps make sure that they have access, the families have access, or the employers are knowledgeable and can help facilitate access?
Right. So on the school end, I think it's a matter of everyone having that shared priority and vision. That from a young age, you're thinking about what's it going to look like in this class, and as they get older. But when we get to that transition planning, that employment becomes a part of that conversation. And I think sometimes it's just really easy for it not to be a part of the conversation, because I'm a parent of teenagers. It's really easy to get focused on the here and now and what's happening in our life. And I kind of don't want to think about what's coming a couple years down the road. But we need to be, like, for my children, I know I need to be. We all need to be. And that those vocational goals, that looking at this is what's coming next, is really kept at the forefront. And it's not on top of teachers to do everything, because you're right, they have a lot to do. But knowing that those services and systems do exist when kids are out of school, that we have a state Office of Vocational Rehabilitation whose main focus is to help Kentuckians with disabilities to obtain or maintain employment. And our schools and Voc Rehab talk together well. But sometimes maybe it needs to happen for everybody, right? That those adult services aren't mandated like education is, and so you have to know to ask.
That's exactly.
Families need to know that that Voc Rehab exists, and that places like Zoom Group exist, and that we have a network of these agencies across the state.
So just kind of interjecting in this point, like, what can Zoom Group do, or what can we do as individuals, again, to get that dialogue and to let these families know that Office of Vocational Rehab is available? Because that's one of the things, and it actually precipitated how StudioZ came about, because I'm getting calls at Zoom Group going, well, I wasn't aware of this, and so on and so forth. And so when I hear that it's not prominently known, it's like, okay, we need to create a vehicle to get this word out there. So outside of trying to do this in a simple form of a podcast to get it out to as many people as possible, what other things do you think we can do? Because it's essential. I know that the Office of Vocational Rehab does a fabulous job, but it's connecting the people to the resource.
Right.
So do you have any tidbits for that, or?
So I think what I would hope to see is that family groups start talking about that.
Okay.
So I think a lot of parents are a part of, here in Louisville, you have the Down syndrome of Louisville that involves a lot of families and other types of family groups, a lot of kids who might be involved in Special Olympics or other activities as well, to know that the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation exists, that there are a lot of agencies out there that can really know and get to know your son or daughter as they grow and are looking for employment, to figure out not just any job, but what a good job can be.
Right.
But it's really spreading that word. I think the word comes best when it's from trusted people.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we can get educators to realize that this needs to be a part of the conversation, students and families look to teachers and trust them, or to each other, right? So if one mom talks to another mom about good experiences they've had, or what it took to find a good job, that we can learn from our other moms. I think as parents, we often appreciate that. But as the service system, we can put good service out there and good information, but we need people to talk to each other because they trust each other more than they do those agencies that maybe they haven't interacted with yet.
Well, I think that it's a great prompt for me to get a little bit more actively engaged for Zoom and also speak more with those parents. One of the things that has happened before, we had the ability to do pre-employment transition services, which is something we haven't really touched on, but it's kind of a precursor to that's a part of the discussion when you're doing that transition. It is a service out there, but we as providers need to go out into the community more and find those family groups and talk to the child level agency, because in the youth there are a lot of nonprofit agencies or providers that are facilitating services particular to disabilities, like the visually impaired, cerebral palsy. There's just a variety of them. So I guess what you've just given me is a call to action to go meet with those executive directors and say, hey, let's start the conversations now. And until this point, I really hadn't put that up probably as much as a priority, but thank you for that.
That's right. and when we have something like Employment First, the hope and the plan is that because we have said this is the priority for the Commonwealth, that we just have to be more intentional on those conversations and those connections. So often we all work in silos where, a state agency or an organization is really good at what it is they do, and we might not look at, because it just are more things to take on, knowing what other parts of the system do or knowing what others have to offer. And what happens is, you're right, then people and families don't know to ask for what they don't know exists.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of it. You can't miss something that you've never had, but if you don't know about it, how can you take advantage of it, or at least not take advantage, but utilize it as an additional tool and to help move you forward. So from a standpoint, what may employers do to help in this situation as well?
Right. So if people are going to get jobs, employers are a big part of this equation, right? So first, Employment First, there aren't any mandates on employers. It's not telling a business who they have to hire in any way. But it does bring to the table, we hope, more employers in the business community to realize that people with disabilities are a key part of our workforce, right? Again, it's so often that disability gets associated with that Social Security disability benefit, and it's a way for people to opt out of the workforce, and that to not look at it in that way, but here's another area to recruit potential employees.
Absolutely.
Because Employment First is first and foremost, it's a workforce issue, right? It's not a disability issue, it's a workforce issue. Right. And for people who need additional supports or thought and planning or accommodations, assistive technology, the disability system is there to help support that, so people can figure out a good job where they can contribute and be productive. But that work is work, right? And so this lies in that conversation.
Or they wouldn't call it work.
Exactly, and it is a lot of work.
Right. Well, I guess, when you're bringing that up about the employers, I think a couple things in the state of Kentucky. We are struggling with a limited workforce. We're having a labor shortage. So, this is an optimal time to really think about more abilities and broaden the spectrum of bringing others in. And I think it's also important to, and I didn't know this until not too long ago, but if you do have a disability and you are employed or you seek to be employed and you just need tools, you personally can even reach out to the Office of Vocational Rehab and access accommodations or technology that will help you be successful in your role. That's another thing that I didn't know that they did.
Yeah.
So there are really a lot of resources out there, but we just don't know about them. And then just the awareness concept from you and I having conversations, and then the family conversations that are out and about, and other providers as well. I think that, just kind of transitioning the employer, and some of the employers that Zoom has spoken with, they vocalize concerns because they're not certain that they have the ability to work with an individual that might need supports, that they might have behavioral challenges or, accommodating needs that they may not know how to handle because they don't have that experience. But I think that's another thing that's important to communicate to the community, to everyone, is that the Office of Vocational Rehab, supported employment specialist, that's what we do, that's what they do.
Right.
And so they're key, essential to having that successful transition. That supported employment professional is there to be alongside the individual up front to help get that person-centered plan that to try to help them get exactly the job that they want.
Yeah.
So that it's not just a square peg in a round hole kind of environment, but also that coach can be there to work with the employer as well, so that it can be a smooth transition. And so I think that's important for the folks out there to realize as well, that that's another opportunity with Employment First to garner a supported employment specialist to bring into the equation.
Yeah, so employers are well aware of the fact that turnover is expensive.
Yes.
in any type of economy, and that recruiting can be difficult. And you're right, with even pre-COVID, we were expecting labor shortages in Kentucky. And we've certainly come to see that today. I mean, you have to listen to the news for 3 seconds and you hear about the need for employees. And all these different pushes we have to diversify our applicant pool. Whether it be second chance hiring initiatives that the state is doing, or diversity, equity, inclusion, because we know that diversifying our applicant pool is good business. And sometimes there is that hesitancy, one, because people with disabilities haven't always been thought of in that conversation, and that I think the fear of the unknown, that it might be harder, that it's going to be harder than it needs to be. On one end, you're right. If our Voc Rehab and our supported employment services are doing their job well, they've really gotten to know that job seeker, and not just going out and applying for the first thing they see, but what would a good job look like for this person? So often we think of those stereotypical kind of jobs for people, and not that working in fast food isn't a good job for some people, but if your brain processes a task best of, from a very clear beginning to an end, I move on to the next, and you're moving forward, then something like being a lobby attendant could be really difficult because you clean the table, you move on to the next one, someone messes it up, and now your sequence has gotten out of whack. It's not, a lot of us might think the work isn't difficult, but if it's not how you process information, it makes it harder, and so you become more reliant on someone else to help you with it, or there might be some behavior issues, or lots of us have behavior issues. We call them frustrations on the job.
Just a bad day at the office.
Who hasn't had a bad day at the office? But if we're getting to know someone well and putting thought into where that person could work, and then learning about that business too, right? Like helping that employer by saying, what are your hiring needs? What's it like to work in your company, and what's most important to you? So that when they are recommending employees, not only are we bringing you a potential employee, but I know this person and I've learned enough about your business that I think this could be a good fit for both of you. Because when we help people find jobs and we help employers get good employees, then everybody is winning.
Yes, it's a win-win, and that's really, really valuable. And whatnot. So what else would you like to share with us about Employment First, and other call to actions, or what is I know in the intro we talked about you're leading Kentucky's ABSI, and then you're on the National Board of ABSI, because we use acronyms in our environment. Let's just step back one second. Would you like to explain, give the actual name of what ABSI stands for? We'll go there.
So ABSI is a national advocacy and membership organization that stands for the Association of People Supporting Employment First. And so I have been on the national board of that organization and a part of Kentucky ABSI also for a long time. And they work with members, so providers who provide these employment support services, people with disabilities, states, to help make sure that the things work better, right? Because the ultimate goal is that employment rates for people with disabilities go up.
Yes.
And that we see more and more people entering the workforce in good jobs and showing what they can do. And so ABSI does a lot of work around education and helping people know those good strategies, because when good strategies are implemented, people with disabilities, including people with significant disabilities, get good jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So education, but then they're also able to do some work at the policy level and looking at initiatives like Employment First and how do we make it more than just words, but how do we really get things to move forward. And so much of that is dependent upon the people in states and understanding what it can look like. So if we've seen a state that has had their employment rates increase for people with disabilities, what did we do? And how can we bring some of that to our state that works in a way that it could work for Kentucky? And maybe what didn't work so well, so we might want to avoid that, or how do we make it work here? And so learning from what other states have done can be really helpful, but how can we do that in a way that makes sense for Kentucky?
Understood. So if individuals listening have questions about Employment First or ABSI, do you have any specific direction that you would like to send them or recommend for them?
Yeah, so ABSI everyone has a website, they have a Facebook page, they probably have other things, but I don't do as much other social media. So it's www.apse.org is ABSI.org, where you can learn more about Employment First and what that really means. Here in Kentucky, we have employmentfirstky.org, and that's our state Employment First page. It's still kind of in the beginning stages of a web page, but it has the executive order, it has some other resources, and my contact information is on there as well.
And I was going to say, that's really what's most important, if they have questions of you, that they can reach out to you. And, it's one of those things, if you want to share this podcast, please do so. And if you want to see more information, we're going to place it on our StudioZ.space website as well.
Wonderful.
And so I love exploring this with you. I look forward to having another conversation about where Employment First is going, how it is learning from other states, because I believe that's underway. And to your point, bringing to Kentucky best practices for employment for individuals that might have otherwise had barriers. This is a very exciting time. And so I'm just looking forward to continuing our dialogue and sharing with more people about thinking about employment, thinking about the opportunity to bring in individuals with disabilities into their employ, and then just being a part of the success.
Yeah.
So, but I thank you very much for being on this segment, and I can't thank you enough, and it's a pleasure. So.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
All right, Katie. Well, we will stay in touch. And everybody, thank you very much for joining us on StudioZ. And we'll look forward to you for our next session. Thank you. Have a good day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. To see upcoming guests, check us out at StudioZ.space.